whooped the Wolves for being on the front page of the magazine this past month. It's nice to know famous people.
Pretty awesome.
You know,
We got heroes.
you're not famous people. Sorry I missed last week. Brian filled in for me. I had some of that Congo sinus rot, whatever you call it, where you can't breathe. I think I about got that whipped. When we finished up 2 weeks ago, we had finished the third day or the third span of time. And to reiterate that just a little bit, if you'll remember, the main thing with that in the third day is that we got all the vegetation on Earth. And that's when the dinosaurs appeared. And we talked about that in length. Very interesting how that all came about. And so now we're going to read in Genesis 1, 14 through 19 as we get into the fourth span of time, what all's going on there. I want to back up just a little bit. This is the verses for the third day that was written, I think, by the Message. And I just like the way it's worded, and I'll set that up for today coming into the fourth day. So beginning of the third day, it says, "The creative hand of God swept across the firmament, causing all manner of plants to rise out of the earth, each producing seed to sustain life. God looked at the blooming firmament and saw that it was good when vegetation covered the earth." And that was the third span of time. So today, we're getting into the fourth. And I'm going to read it. If you want to follow along with me, if you have it, it's verses 14 through 19. Set the stage. Okay, beginning in 14. "And God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven, and divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for the seasons, for the days and the years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights, a greater light to rule the day, and a lesser light to rule the night. And made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of heaven to give them light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and the night, and divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. The evening and the morning." That was the evening and the morning of the fourth day. And I'm going to read the way the Message reads it, which I think is really worded good. "Then God looked into the heavens. There was placed the sun to light the day and to warm the earth, a moon to regulate the waters of the deep, and stars for navigation through the darkness of the night. And God stepped back and seen the beauty of the heavens and saw that it was good. When the sun, the moon, and the stars appeared, and it was the fourth span of time." All right. So as you get into the fourth day, fourth span of time, still in the habit of saying day because I guess that's the way we were all raised, more or less. If you'll remember back in the third day, we're at the beginning of the third day, the earth was not spinning, it was not tilted. All the land was in one big wad called Guanwa land. Somewhere towards the end of the third day, and there's no exact dates, of course, we talked about how the land broke up into separate land masses. This is done with plate tectonics, which you're probably familiar with, maybe from your science classes. As we get into the fourth day, the land masses have pretty much, all the plate tectonics are in full effect. The land masses have moved around all over on the face of the earth and have separated. And they're moving towards their current present position as we know the land masses on Earth today, more or less. Volcanoes were very rampant through this time period because of this movement of plate tectonics. As you know, the plates move on the face of the earth. They like this, and it's essentially between the plates. It's a crack where the magma and lava can rise up to the surface of the earth and creates the volcanoes, creates more land mass. It also moves the land masses away from each other or towards each other. if you're familiar with, you've heard the Ring of Fire, all around the Pacific Ocean, starting down in Chile and Argentina, and you come all the way up South America, and you go the west coast of Mexico and up the west side of the United States. The volcanoes, the San Andreas Fault, goes around to the Aleutian Islands on the Alaska, down through part of Russia, and then we get into Japan, and Koreas, and into Indonesia. And if you look at that, right now it's the most active place on the earth, and it's just called the Ring of Fire, and it's just one volcano after the other. The main reason the San Andreas Fault is where it is, and Mount St. Helens, and the other volcanoes that we've had recently down in Mexico, and Chile, and Argentina, Peru, those are because the Pacific plate is hitting the North American plate where the United States sits on. The Pacific plate is underneath the water. It is going under the North American plate. And it's pulling away the landmass, which created the big fault, San Andreas Fault. And it also, again, creates that crack where the magma and stuff can come up, and you get these pop-up volcanoes all the way around. So that's all happening during this time right here. We're moving land masses to the places where they need to be, north and south and east and west. We're setting things up for man to appear on Earth. It was a really good time for the dinosaurs because this created a lot of heat and really fed the vegetation big time with the constant sunlight that we were having, the heat. There's no freezing of plants and stuff like that. The vegetation is just going crazy at this time, and the dinosaurs just continue to bloom. The dinosaurs lived for 3 different time periods, geologic time periods: the Jurassic, Triassic, and the Cretaceous. And it covered 180 million years. So right now we're somewhere around the 180, 150 million mark, something like that, with the span of time. So as these plates broke apart, the dinosaurs went with them, but they're still towards the middle of the earth. You don't see dinosaurs up on top of the northern and southern latitudes. It's too cold. You have to remember they were cold-blooded animals. Everything as we can find in the fossil record were cold-blooded animals, which means they're exothermic. They depend on an outside source of heat to heat their bodies so that they can move and eat and digest and grow. Endothermic is what we are, where we eat food and we generate our own energy from within, and we can heat our own bodies. So we can live in cooler temperatures and freezing temperatures and endure that. But dinosaurs couldn't. They were all cold-blooded animals. Now you think about, well, how do those plates move all the way from where it broke up into their different places and stuff? And even today, all the plates on the earth are moving at a rate of anywhere from a ½ inch to 2 inches per year. Well, if you multiply that out and you start over here, if you move 2 inches a year for 180 million years, that's over 5,000 miles. So you can see very easily how you can go from way up over here, say where Europe is, and move something all the way down and around the backside of the earth where South America is, just at 2 inches a year. It's hard to realize how long 180 million years is. When you consider, man, we've just been here several thousand years, and it just seems like forever. But
How deep are those faults? Deep, that
well, they go all the way down through the mantle, so 80
Right.
miles.
80 miles?
Could be 80 miles, yeah. It's they're really deep. I mean, they go down to where we know that from what we can see on seismic, it looks like an example, the Pacific plate going under the North American plate, it folds under like this. And when it folds down at about 70, 80 miles, it's remelted and turns back into rock again and just recycles itself like that. One thing that I did want to mention is, how are we so sure of this? I was a little bit in doubt when I first heard about this as a geologist, of course, as I guess anybody would. But if you ever look, and I know you've seen this, how the land masses actually fit together like a puzzle. I know you've seen this where the nooks and the crannies, they all fit together and you can see how they broke apart. And if you will, go to the west coast of Africa and look at the rocks like a layer cake. You look at the color, you look how they're stacked upon each other, you look at the fossil record as it goes up in the fossil record, and then you go over to South America, and that hump on the northeast corner of South America fits beautifully into the southwest little dig out in Africa. And if you take the rock section from both places and put them together, they match perfectly. It's unbelievable. It's like if you had a layered cake and you cut it in half and looked and opened it up, you can see the two halves like that. So we know that at one time they were matched perfectly together like that, and we see that like that most all over the earth, which is really interesting. Okay, so as we get down in to the fourth day, God said, "Let there be lights in the heavens to divide the day from the night." Well, we had light because we had continuous sunlight. So if you read this, the word bara, if you'll remember when we first began our studies, bara means that God created. I mean, he made something out of nothing. After that, he talks about making things. So he didn't create anything new here. You have to realize we're not creating anything new. He's making things from what is already in existence at this point. So the light that we have was already there. You have to remember, not up until this point, at about 250 million years, there was no growth rings on any of the trees and stuff like that. But after this, after the earth starts to spin, we start seeing the growth rings and trees and stuff like that, because, after he set the light into the heaven, then he set the signs, the seasons, the days, and the year. And the earth gets its tilt, so now that you can have, the different seasons of the year. If you know the orbit of our planet and how it goes around the sun and its orientation with its tilt, you can see how we can get the different seasons of the year. One thing that I think is really cool, a point that was brought up one time, is that in spring and fall, which is typically most people's favorite times of the year, part of that reason is because that's when the earth is in full balance. There's equal number of hours of sunlight and equal number of hours of darkness. So we're not overbalanced either way. It's a peaceful, calming time that we get to experience twice a year in the spring and the fall. Of course, the wintertime, we have more darkness than light. It's cold, it's miserable. Summertime, we have way more sun and heat, and it's
Hot and miserable.
it's what?
Hot and miserable.
Hot and miserable.
Hey, Randy,
Yes.
I got something that's been bothering me.
Well laid on me.
Okay. So some of these things that we're talking about, can we all agree that they're done two ways? Either God just created them there, or they evolved. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, like dinosaurs, they just showed up. Right? God made those. Those didn't
Well,
evolve.
he created those.
He
Okay?
created those. Those didn't evolve from anything.
Right. He created those and placed them on earth, is my belief.
Okay? Light and dark just evolved. But things, explain this. Things are now are being created because
Yes.
of that light.
Yes, and
the
I'm just
dark.
fixing to talk about
Okay,
it.
that's what I'm just. having
You're always a
hard
step
time.
ahead of me.
I know.
Ah, it's good. You're good.
Okay, keep
Right,
going.
right.
Man. I'm just having a hard time figuring out what.
Let me get through this little section right here and then ask that question again and see if you still have the
I
same
don't know if I
question.
can word it like that, but go ahead. I can't remember what I said.
Well, in verse 16 it says, God placed a greater light and a lesser light. And so, there's no specific time. Everything was already in existence at this point. Again, because he doesn't talk about the word bara, about creating anything new. He's just talking about making things and setting things in their place. So, At this point in time, this is where we get, we have the sun and the moon, and he sets everything in place. It's believed up until this point, everything was kind of in chaos. Who knows going in what directions, what was spinning, what was not spinning, what was attached to what was orbiting what, we don't really know. But at this point in time, when he does this, everything is set to order. This is when he puts, the sun is set in its place, the planets start orbiting the sun in a planned, orderly, measurable manner. The earth begins to spin, the moon orbits the earth, and everything is set into place now. Whereas before, everything was kind of static, so to speak. Let me ask you this. Does the moon spin on its axis?
No, doesn't, we only see one side of it. Right? The dark side, we don't see it. So
Well,
it's not
typically
spinning.
there's not actually a dark side. It's actually a far side of the moon. And when I was going through back all this again, I remember this from college. I was like you, we always see this seems like the same face side of the moon. We don't ever get to see really the back side of it, but that's not true. This gives you something to think about here. The moon actually spins on an axis, but it takes 23 1/3 days to do so, which is really cool because it is in perfect rotation with its rotation around the Earth. So at the same time it's rotating on its axis, it's moving around the Earth, and it appears that we do not see the moon spinning. I'll read you something that's I found this yesterday, which I thought was a really good description. The rotation of the moon, or the time it takes to rotate on its axis exactly once, is 27.3 days. And the moon's orbital period, or the time the moon takes to complete one revolution around the Earth, is the exact same time. And that's why it appears that the moon always shows the same face. We see the same side of the moon and never get to see the far side of it. So that had nothing to do really much with what we're talking about, but I thought it was cool. Because I always really thought that the moon didn't spin either, but it does, just very slowly, and it moves at the exact same time as it rotates around the Earth.
So just out of curiosity, if we didn't have the moon, the size, the diameter, the spin, what happens to life on Earth? Does anybody know?
Oh, well, yeah.
Now Russia and China are talking about going up there and putting a home base and digging up rock out of it and mining whatever's inside the moon.
Well,
Just
good
kinda
luck
like-
to them. I don't know how they'll ever get it back and use it, but
Well, it messes with the tide, and if you don't have tides. and you
Yeah,
don't
I
have-
understand
Yes.
that part, but beyond that,
Then plant life on Earth will die. I mean, it's just catastrophic.
there's so many things that depend on the Earth and Moon. That's almost another whole topic of what
right.
the moon does.
So my point is
does.
this, how perfect is it?
That's it, exactly. How perfect is it? And that was my point was saying about the moon spinning. There's a reason for that. How perfect is that? That God set it there in that way. The Earth started spinning during this time is because its molten core, and that molten core that we have here on the Earth is what creates the gravity. It's what keeps us sucked down to the face of the Earth. If we didn't have that, we'd be like the moon. We'd be floating around or other places and barely even be touching the ground.
Okay, I can't do it. I got to do that.
All right, lay it on us. It's a good
We're
time.
the trust tree, right? We're the tree of trust.
Absolutely.
Okay, this is not a very
There's no dumb
dumb
questions.
And I'm so sorry that I did not listen to science class. So, gravity, we're spinning around.
Yes.
Okay. But it takes 24 hours to make a revolution around the sun?
The Earth rotates in 24 hours.
One revolution in 24 hours.
The Earth spins in 24 hours.
Okay.
The moon spins in 27 1/3 days. It takes 30 days for the moon to
Then
go
where's
around the Earth.
gravity in all this?
Huh?
Where's gravity in all this?
Well, that's what attaches the moon to the Earth. If the Earth didn't have gravity, the moon would
floating
just,
away from the sun.
I know. So what?
the sun keeps the Earth in orbit. The gravity, which is the perfect amount
Yeah.
of gravity, where we're set, so that we maintain the exact same orbit around the sun every year. Every year. At the same time, the Earth spins 24 hours, gives us night and day, so we can have equal. Like I said, the moon then rotates around us,
Which again is gravity.
which gives us month. You know, we go from full moon to no moon, back to full moon to no moon, which makes all the difference in the world in how our plants grow. We have to have the changes in the moon for that.
Can you answer how many days it takes for the Earth to orbit the sun?
365.
365.
Okay.
365. So that's what's happening here on this fourth day. All of that is getting put into place. Up until this point in time, all that we're just now talking about is in chaos. But now it's in an orderly condition. He has not created anything new. He's just put it together for our benefit to create the nights and the days and the seasons to start with.
I think what Troy was getting at is that you're saying he didn't create anything new, but he did create something new. He created day and he created night. Maybe he didn't need to create the elements to make day and night, but he did create that order out of chaos. That's what he created.
Yeah, and it all goes back to the definition of what you think create means versus make. And that's the two different words that are used there is bara and
That other word.
what's the other word? I've forgotten. I can't remember it off the top of my head.
So were you asking like what God created and then what was made after creation?
Yeah. Okay. So like, yeah, we talked about the plants, right?
Yeah? They were created.
Those were created. I thought I kind of got the indication those were
Made?
made as a result of the heat, humidity, and all that stuff that was around, you know, the equator and all that good stuff.
Well,
I think if you look at it in this way, I mean, I think they were created because there was no seed to begin with.
yes.
But if you look at it this way, as in God breathed life, and that gives life to everything. Everything you do today, your genius, you're able to invent, your talents, all that kind of stuff, is all God created because He literally breathed life into the universe. So everything stems from that one thing.
Yeah.
Whether it was created in that moment or whether it was just a development over many centuries of billions of years, it is all God created.
And evolutionists,
Which is evolution.
well, evolutionists want you to believe that everything started with that single cell,
Yeah, I'm not
you
talking
know,
about
and it
that,
went to
but-
2 cells, and then that became a fish, and that fish crawled up
Sure.
on land and became a monkey, and then it became us, and you know that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's not the way.
But evolution is real. I mean,
Yeah.
things evolve.
Evolution does. I mean, we change ourselves to fit our environment.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example of that evolution that's been proven. They took Scandinavian people up north, up in Norway, and moved them to Africa. We're talking about blonde-headed, white-skinned people, big time. Moved them to Africa, watched them for 10 generations, and they turned dark. Their hair turned dark, their skin turned dark, and they became looking like Africans because they had to adapt to their environment. Same thing goes for a lot of this. But you have to start back and realize, you know, like with these planets, the moon, the sun, the earth, and all this that's going on right now, it started in verse 1 when God said He created the heavens and the earth. That's when all this stuff was created. But up until this time, it's not in an orderly fashion. Here on the fourth day, He sets everything in place. Does that make sense at all? Okay. So, before the end of this fourth span of time, now that we've got the land masses moved around, the earth is spinning, it's in a tilt, we have our seasons, we have night and days, and look at what major thing happened during this fourth span of time that we can tell from what we know from science, from the rocks and everything.
The dinosaurs died.
The dinosaurs died. During this fourth day, sometime probably towards the end of it, is when the end of the dinosaurs' reign happened on Earth. Because as we get into the next day, the fifth span of time, we are now looking at the plants and the animals and the things that we are familiar with just before he puts humans on Earth. It's the things that we know and that we see today. So he had to get rid of the dinosaurs before all of that could appear. Because there's no way that that could have coexisted with the environment that we live in today. So what caused this extinction? Extinction. And why?
Well, it's been told a meteor, right?
Well, that's what we believe.
Yeah.
God set the stage for man, and like I said, he has to stabilize the planet for us to be here. Because up until this time, it's too dangerous for, like say, the animals that we see today, like let's just say cows and pigs and sheep and man. They can't, none of them could live in this carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, low oxygen environment with dinosaurs, about the extreme heat that they needed because they were cold-blooded animals, and the lack of edible plants that, for us to eat was good for them, probably not so good for us. And, the animals that did exist, were really not conducive to our diet, so to speak. So he had to get all of that, he had to clean the slate and set the stage to bring on the rest of this. Because now, if you look at the big picture, we've got everything set. We're setting everything into place. We've got the earth, we've got the atmosphere, we've got the water, we've got the land, we've got the vegetation. We have now created the carbons in the earth that we're going to need here now in the future for oil and gas and coal and things to heat ourselves, and the energy and the steel that we make to build our buildings. So somewhere at this point, he kills the dinosaurs, and we believe this is from a huge meteorite that was sent to Earth, or an asteroid. The difference between an asteroid and a meteorite is an asteroid is when it's up in the universe. A meteorite, once it hits the Earth's atmosphere. I don't know why they do that. This happened right at about 66 million years ago. We've been able to date this, through the methods that we've discussed previously, and we're pretty much able to nail this down exactly to 66 million years, and it's global wide. Now, how did we discover this possible meteorite that killed the dinosaurs? And I have to tell you, I've scrutinized this a lot, so has a lot of professors that I've been around, and I'm really comfortable with this because of the dating and the things that we know that has happened. You can make up your own mind here in a minute after I tell you about it. Up until the 1940s, we really didn't have any idea what killed the dinosaurs. Didn't really even have much of a speculation at all. We just know that they existed. And when you look in the fossil record, it is an immediate extinction. There's no dragging out through a little bit of time. It was done. And that was ocean-wise and land-wise, all across the globe. So, back in the 1940s, searching for oil, seismic crews were shooting seismic off the coast of Mexico. And they started seeing on their seismic concentric circles in these deep layers down below the surface. Well, once they processed all that seismic together and put it together, we realized this was a big, huge ring, big, huge circle. Well, what could possibly make that? Well, it looked just like an impact crater. So to prove that, they went in and they drilled quite a few wells down into the core of it and around to the edges, and were able to verify that yes, this was actually an impact crater because of the shock quartz and the radiation in the rocks that they found at that depth when it hit. And the crater has since filled up with sediment, and it's not really viewable from satellite image now.
Where was that again? Gulf?
I'm sorry, it is off the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, where Cancun is. Y'all know where Cancun is? If you just go just a little bit northwest of Cancun, this meteorite hit halfway on land and halfway in the water, is what it appears. Now, this meteorite, because of the size of the hole that we see there, was a little over 12 miles in size. That's like from here to Newcastle. So you think of an orb, a rocky metal orb coming down towards Earth that's the size between Graham and Newcastle. It was traveling at over 42,000 miles an hour. That's quick. And it hit with a force of 10 billion Hiroshima bombs. You know, Hiroshima bomb is like a little firecracker compared to what this would. So they are able to calculate this for the volume of sediment that was blown out, how big the meteorite was that hit. It created a hole that was over a mile deep and 200 miles wide. So you just think, if it hit today, we would have a crater that was a mile deep between here and San Antonio. That's how big that was. Well, something that big certainly was intentional, I think, by God, and this was his way to clean the slate that we've been talking about. It killed most of the land animals, the dinosaurs, so to speak, within several hundred miles immediately from the percussion of the hit, which is certainly understandable. They think within 3 days to a couple of months, everything globally around the Earth pretty much died.
Because it got cooler?
Well, because of what I'm fixing to tell you. Where the meteorite hit, this is so perfect, and this is a God thing, is that the meteorite hit in a perfect spot, being half land and half water. Because if it had hit all water, it would have just made a splash. It wouldn't have made the percussive impact that was needed to kill things out, and wouldn't have created the dust and the gases that needed also to float around the Earth.
Were the continents pretty much like they are now?
Yes, the
somewhat?
continents were pretty much where they were
Obviously
right
they
now,
moved, but-
within several miles.
Yeah.
By hitting half earth and half water like it did, it created a sulfur gas, a hydrogen sulfide gas, with the combination of the hydrogen from the water and the sulfur that was found in the limestone of where it hit on Earth. Had it been all land, it wouldn't have had that chemical composition. Had it hit all water, it wouldn't have had the explosive effect that was needed. So it was a perfectly timed, a perfectly placed, thank you, where it hit. Also, north and south-wise, it was right about in the very center where the dinosaurs lived, so that it could kill north and south-wise pretty equally. Also, in east and west. I told you before that most of the dinosaurs lived over on our part of the world, not as much in Europe and Africa and all that as it did over here. So it was placed just perfectly, it appears, by God for that to happen. So what happened when this hit is that really and truly it created a nuclear winter, so to speak. Because so much dirt, ash, smoke, and deadly gases all over the earth that it covered it where there was no sunlight that reached the earth for probably close to 3 to 4 years. So we had a nuclear winter. Well, what would that do? Anything that didn't get killed by the gas, anything that didn't get killed by the percussion of the blast, had to die because it was cold-blooded. There was no heat. They couldn't move. They didn't have anything to eat anyway. But the darkness and the coldness is what killed everything else that was left in the nuclear winter. It did the same thing for the oceans. You got to start at the very bottom, and by having a nuclear winter, even though there wasn't a big blast in the oceans to kill things, what it did was that it killed the algae and the plankton and things like that, because they have to have photosynthesis to grow, which is what the small fish eat on, which now have nothing to eat, which the bigger fish don't have anything to eat, and it just kills everything all down the line. The only thing that lived through that was the deepest deep water creatures that were not exposed, that didn't need the sunlight, that were not affected by the gas and the fallout from the meteorite. On land, the only thing that lived and existed were the small things like snakes, alligators, turtles, small rodents, things that were burrowing animals that could get out of the atmosphere, so to speak, and preserve themselves, needed minimal things to eat. We see that those have continued to grow through the fossil records and were not completely eliminated. When you look, the event killed 90% of all the animals that we see in the fossil record at that point. It also killed over 90% of all the insects on the face of the earth, and killed about 80% of everything that was in the oceans at this time.
Hey, Randy,
What?
I know we gotta go. And you're getting short with me.
No, not at all.
Do science people like you agree with this 100%, or is
Yes.
there other thoughts out there of what happened to the dinosaurs?
Yes,
You know,
I'm sure there is. But
There
this
is other thought. There's other thoughts out there, but they're kind of clinging on to previous thoughts before we knew about the meteorite. I think anybody that is current, present day, that's done their studying and can put two and two together, realizes this.
This is the way it went down.
What about the flat earth?
There's craters all over the ocean.
yeah, flat earth.
But they weren't big enough. They weren't big enough, and they weren't hit in the right spot, and they weren't hit at the right time. There was meteors that hit before the dinosaurs hit. So,
There's one in Odessa.
there's one out in Arizona. That's huge. One last thing that I want to mention real quick before we go is that to verify this event, at the end of the Cretaceous period, which was 66 million years ago, there is a thin layer of sediment that you can find all over the face of the earth, globally. And it's anywhere from a ½ inch thick to 6 inches thick of iridium. And iridium is caused by a blast from a meteorite. It's a radioactive sediment. And you can trace this at the top of the Cretaceous period all around the face of the earth. So we know that it was globally, and it all happened at the exact same time. It all dates out to be 66 million years ago. And everything above this iridium deposit, there's no more dinosaurs at all. You see nothing, no existence, no trace of anything that was below that, except for the few animals that I just told you about and a few insects. So this was the change at this point. And at this point is when somewhere there is the end of the fourth span of time. And now we have set the stage as we get into the fifth day, which we'll pick up next week. So